Media. But she very quickly gets put in her place by Cassian, and not so much that Cassian was trying to put her in her place, but it was because he saw all the holes in what she was trying to do. He saw all the mistakes that could potentially put her and him, as a result, at risk.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this 10th adventure. That's right, 10th adventure. Not that there's anything specific going on in my life to make me tense. However, in reviewing this week's Andor, I feel very tense. We're going to be talking about Andor episode 5. Oh, excuse me, Andor season 2, episode 5. I have friends everywhere. And yeah, no matter how many times I've reviewed this particular episode, I always, I feel tense at the end of each rewatch. I don't know. There's just something about this particular episode that gets a rise out of me. I feel pretty worked up and pretty tense. And I guess naturally so. This is the second episode in the arc. We know now that these are 3-episode arcs. This being the middle episode in the arc. It's a lot of buildup of tension to a big conclusion in the next episode. So yeah, there's that, and then there's also, I think, for me, there are a lot of interactions in this episode that really just grate my nerves, that really just kind of get under my skin, and so that has really lent itself to me feeling tense at the end of every rewatch, and we're going to talk about that. This is what we're going to actually expand on for this week's conversation. But before we get into all of that, I do want to let you know that if you notice a difference in quality of sound, audio quality for this week's episode, I am using some new gear. I'm testing out some new gear. I bought some microphones for my iPhone, and I thought I'd test it out here for this week's Path of the Jedi. I want to kind of scale down in terms of the amount of equipment it takes to record these episodes. And so, I just want to test this out, see how it sounds. I do appreciate your understanding. If there is a reduction in quality, it's because I'm recording this completely on my phone and I'm, again, testing out new equipment.
Your antenna's bent.
One more thing before we get into our main conversation. I want to remind you that we might have some spoilers on today's episode. So if you haven't seen Andor Season 2, Episode 5, I Have Friends Everywhere, I encourage you to go ahead and pause today's show and go watch that, and then come back and listen to the podcast.
I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
Okay, now we got all of that out of the way. Let's just get right into it. One of the first themes that jumped out to me in reviewing this episode was the theme of hierarchy, right? Like there's always a bigger fish. I felt like in all the different plot lines and interactions, it was people like just flexing, right? Like they're the bigger fish. We see it right off the top at the beginning of the episode, towards the beginning of the episode with Cyril in his office, right? He's the head honcho in his office. He runs that whole division. But we see the ISB just come in and take over without any, just even blinking an eye, right? Completely strips him of his authority. Not necessarily strips him of his authority, but supersedes his authority. And Cyril definitely wasn't happy about that, but they had no qualms with not only detaining the entire office, including Cyril, but ransacking everything in the office in search of the listening device. That's what they were supposedly looking for. We know by the end of the episode that Cyril was likely just playing along, but still, definitely a hierarchy in the chain of command with the Empire, very bureaucratic system. And then you have Cassian's interactions, and you have Luthen obviously is always pulling rank. You have even Saw Gerrera. I mean, he's running his own ship as well. So there's a lot of examples of hierarchy within this episode. Even actually, now that I think about it, in the Gorman with the Gorman rebels, right? They kind of have their own pecking order, but there was just something deeper. I didn't feel like hierarchy as a theme was gonna cut it. And then I got to thinking, well, it's not so much hierarchy because what the reason one of the reasons why Andor as a show shines is the human aspect, right? And therefore the interactions between the different characters and the arcs and the journeys that these characters go through. And so that got me to thinking. So beyond hierarchies, it really is then the posturing, right? Because like they're all from different worlds, they're all from different things. There's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that are moving. Um, and each as the puzzle pieces start to converge and interact with each other or come in contact with each other, everyone then starts to posture, right? Like I'm posturing that I know more or than you do, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty common principle at least in my field, in the field of network marketing, sales, entrepreneurism. It's very common to hear the word posturing, and basically it's positioning yourself, right? It's positioning yourself as X, Y, or Z in an interaction. In my particular context, it's positioning yourself as an expert in the field, right? What if you're in the health field, if you're in the fitness field, or whatever your particular market happens to be, or positioning yourself as somebody who can help solve the problems of the people that you're selling your products and services to, right? That's posturing. Again, really used a lot in sales and marketing. However, I think everybody postures in their interactions without knowing it, right? Without knowing it, because not everybody, again, is in sales or marketing. But I think we all do it naturally. Another really kind of not obvious, but where it happens pretty commonly, without us knowing it, is just the differences in people's economic status, right? In class. Now, here in the West and in most places, there's not really a class system, but there kind of is, right? Like there's this unspoken class system. There's words for it. Like there's your one percenters, two percenters. You have your middle class. You have your lower income people. So there's words for it. So there's definitely a class system, even though it's generally unspoken, and people posture themselves as such. I mean, like the things that people buy is one way for them to posture themselves. The clothes that they wear, the kind of cars that they drive. It's one way that people posture themselves as being of a certain economic status. Now that I think of it, in modern context, this is what some people might call signaling, right? Or at least it's a type of signaling, right? Again, with the clothes that you wear, the car you drive, the house, where you live, you're signaling a certain economic status. At least some people do, right? Like that's why people love brand names, right? Luxury brands, and even with your conversations, you might be virtue signaling, as we hear people say all the time, right? So that's kind of what posturing is. You're signaling to somebody that you're X, Y, and Z. And we see this happening quite a lot in this episode of Andor. I mean, of course, you have the actual bureaucratic hierarchy with Cyril and the ISB, or Cyril versus the ISB. But when Cassian goes to Gorman and he meets up with Enza, and then eventually Caro, we see that yeah, there's a lot of posturing happening. Of course, they don't know Cassian for anything, but they reached out for help, and this was the help that was sent. Enza at the restaurant, or the coffee shop. I don't really know what that is. It's a fancy coffee shop. Let's just say that. the cafe, the fancy cafe that she meets up with Cassian at. Yeah, she walks in and postures herself as kind of this refined spy, and like she knows what she's doing, but she very quickly gets put in her place by Cassian, and not so much that Cassian was trying to put her in her place, but it was because he saw all the holes in what she was trying to do. He saw all the mistakes that could potentially put her and him as a result at risk, right? And so he had to really kind of shut that down very, very quickly. And then his interaction the next day with Enza's father, Caro Rylands, at the shop. He's the same thing, right? He comes in, with this. I don't want to say inflated ego. I mean, we know the Gormans to be a prideful people, but obviously that pride is it's got to be swallowed when you're asking for help, right? Again, they sent for help, and this is the help that they sent, and everything that Cassian had advised him to do, Caro just really basically spits in his face and says, well, figuratively spits in his face and says, tell your friend that I'm not impressed. Yeah, just really kind of like, yeah, okay, so I mean, I'm just here to help you. If you don't want my help, then good luck, right? Good luck. So there's this posturing happening, and for that particular interaction, that's what really got me to hone in on this theme of posturing. And other examples of posturing in this episode of Andor, of course, you have Luthen. He's kind of always posturing, right? He's always angling at something in his world of intrigue and manipulation. He's always got an agenda. So he's gonna naturally be posturing in most, if not all, of his interactions. And then you have Wilmon, who is kind of stuck. He's not been given much of a choice, so he's stuck with Saw Gerrera. Saw has kind of hijacked him to work for him at this point. And Wilmon is actually the expert. He's the one expert in this entire base, in this entire installation. However, he just wants to get out of there, right? He wants to get out of there. He's kind of downplaying his own expertise. He's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I did it. I've done it before. I can teach it, and I'm just going to teach it to you guys, and then leave tomorrow, right? That's all he wanted to do. However, yeah, Saw Gerrera saw him as too valuable, and has kept him has forced him to extend his stay. So he's kind of Wilmon is kind of reverse posturing in this case. He's downplaying his worth. He's downplaying his value because he just wants to get the hell out of there, right? Right. So there's a lot of different posturing happening. There's a lot of different posturing happening, and we see a lot of it go awry, right? Because it's done wrong, or it's done with the wrong intention, and obviously it's what drives the tension and the story forward, right? And we'll see how it all concludes and in the or blows up in the next episode. But what does it all mean, right? Like, what's the whole point of having this conversation for us here on Earth in our context? I mean, hopefully you're not in a situation like any of these individuals who, I mean, it's like a spy versus spy, right? Like, hopefully you're not in a situation of intrigue, and you're not a deeply embedded undercover double agent. But like in everyday context, in everyday life, this is, there's some really useful lessons that we can learn, I think, from this episode. Let's start with Wilmon. We were just talking about him. Now, Wilmon, of course, I mean, hopefully, you're not in his situation. I don't think any of us will ever be in a situation like Wilmon. But what we can learn from Wilmon is the fact that he's selling himself short. Obviously, again, he wants to get out of that situation. However, in most cases, in everyday life here on Earth, I think too often we sell ourselves short. So my message to you, I think the lesson from Wilmon is that you belong in the room, right? You deserve a seat at the table. There was a clip I guess within the last handful of months that I saw, it was a clip of President Barack Obama, and he was doing a talk, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but basically he was saying he realized at some point in his career that he belonged at the table. Right, like he had worked himself all the way to the top of the top, right? Like like the highest echelon of whatever worldwide. I mean, he was the leader of the free world, and so he got into hit some pretty high level, quote unquote, high level circles, and he realized that once he was there, like he absolutely belonged, like especially when compared to some of the other people that he was sitting at the table with, right? So same for you. I want you to know that you belong, right? So like really embrace your own capability. Another example, I'll share a personal story from my own career. I over the years have worked and hustled and built myself a business, a network marketing business, in the top 10, the top 5 of my particular company. I work with a company called Yoli, and since then I've become a very prominent leader, and I've been in rooms, and I've sat at tables with other prominent leaders, not just in my company, but through the entire industry of network marketing, and having gotten there, I realized, yeah, I belonged at that table, right? I embraced my capability. I embraced for sure what I had built and what I had earned, right? I embraced earning that spot. But even before I got there, I think I embraced my capability, and the capability is what got me there, right? So you really have to embrace your expertise, embrace your deservedness, embrace your capability. Sure, maybe you have to still learn a few things and get some more mileage under your belt, but yeah, I mean, understand that you probably already know and are capable of a lot more than you're allowing yourself to admit to yourself and perhaps to other people. That's basically what it means, right? So yeah, don't sell yourself short, right? Don't sell yourself short. Understand that you have a tremendous amount of value that you're probably not allowing yourself to communicate and express to others. That said, this does not give you a hall pass to having overinflated ego, right? Overinflated ego. This is something that really drives me crazy about the entrepreneurism world and the marketing and business world is well, not all of it, but some of it is very ego driven, and people fling their egos around like yeah, well, as soon as they start getting any taste of success and recognition, the ego just goes crazy. Obviously, in this episode of Andor, we see where that backfires, right? The pride and the ego of these Gormans, the Gormans, Gorman insurgency, these rebels. It's to their own detriment because they don't get the help that they need, at least not from Cassian, and they don't take the advice from this individual who has a lot more experience than they do, right? Like they could have prevented. Well, I'm not going to get too far ahead of the story because that's the next episode. But yeah. I mean, if I'm in a situation where somebody has more experience than me, then of course I'm going to recognize that, and I'm certainly not gonna throw it in their face and tell them that I'm not impressed, right? Sure, maybe I'll turn them down, but I'll turn them down civilly and with good reason, right? With good reason. So yeah, you got to watch out for that. Again, just because you're owning your own capability and you're really embracing your own greatness and your expertise, that is not a pass at all to have an overinflated ego and overinflated pride. Because I mean, who wants to be around that, right? Like, who wants to be around an egomaniac? Nobody. At least I don't. At least I don't. So there is really something to be said about cultivating humility, right? I think cultivating humility is just accepting and acknowledging that you're human, right? That I am human. I have my foibles. I have my flaws. There are things that I celebrate about myself, but ultimately, I'm not perfect, right? And so that keeps me grounded. That keeps me humble. I think one of the best examples of somebody who is uber successful, like at the best of the best in his particular field, but is very humble, is somebody who I think for this reason is my favorite boxer of all time, and that is Manny Pacquiao. Right, Manny Pacquiao, one of the greatest boxers ever. Right, his record speaks for itself. Sure, it's not pristine. It's not a perfect record, but he's accomplished so much and so much more than many people. Right, like in all the different weight divisions that he's got titles and belts under, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, despite all these accolades, despite all these accomplishments, and despite his just sheer skill and ability and tenacity as a boxer, he's just one of the most humble individuals that you'll ever meet. I mean, like listen to all his post fight interviews. I mean, even when he knocks a guy out cold, he'll be like, "Yeah, you know what? He's a great fighter. It was really, he put up a good fight." And yeah, I'm just doing my job. You know what I mean? Like there's no flex. There's no like just like hyping himself up or anything like that. He's just, yeah, I'm just doing my job. I like to box. I'm just doing my job. Yeah, yeah, and I think for me that's one of the reasons why he'll always be regarded as one of the best in that particular sport. So yeah, yeah, I really think there is something to be said about humility. While also being able to embrace your capability, embrace your own greatness, and the fact that you do deserve to be in the room, you do deserve a seat at that table. Now, there is one more layer to this, and that is the person sitting across the table from you, or whoever you're interacting with in this posturing scenario. Remember, in this conversation about Andor, all these situations where people are posturing and positioning themselves as whatever, whatever, they're interaction between two or more people, right? And so, anytime we're in a situation where we're positioning ourselves or posturing ourselves or signaling, it involves another individual, at least one more individual in the conversation. And what happens is when we're posturing, when we're really working so hard to present ourselves as one thing or in a certain way, we unconsciously make snap judgments of the person we're interacting with. Now, I know we kind of do that naturally, and it is very unconscious. But the snap judgment it's a measuring up, right? When you're posturing, you very quickly and unconsciously size somebody up based on whatever unconscious criteria you have in your head, whatever belief systems. You size people up, and whatever snap judgment you've come up with about the individual that you're talking to determines how you interact with them, right? Determines how you posture with them, right? All right. It determines how you position yourself in that conversation. Um, Again, it's something that we all do unconsciously, and it's a natural thing. However, the drawback of this is that it creates barriers. Right, when you've made a judgment about somebody, when you've drawn a conclusion, when you've sized them up, you've unconsciously told yourself that you already know who that person is, and what that does is it closes the door to you getting to know them on a deeper level. It closes that human interaction, right? Man, honestly, I think that's a travesty. I think that's a travesty, especially in a world where there seems to be less and less connectedness. The one thing that we cannot sacrifice is human connection, right? But if we're busy posturing and positioning ourselves and signaling, then we're too concerned about how we're being perceived, and not concerned enough about trying to understand the individual or individuals we're interacting with. The truth is, you don't need to posture, right? You don't need to position yourself as any specific thing. You don't need to do any of that because it's pretense at whatever level, even if it's unconscious or it has no purpose. Any kind of posturing, any kind of signaling is pretense, and pretense just creates walls, and walls get in the way of connection. And if all the examples that I cited today from this episode of Andor weren't enough, I'll give you one more example that is actually the opposite of everything that we've been talking about, the opposite of all those other interactions. This was an interaction where there was actually a lot of connection and was very human. And I'm talking about the concierge at the hotel, the hotel where Cassian was staying at on Gorman. Concierge bellman. I forgot to look up his name, the character's name. But as a concierge or as a bellman, you're just used to just doing your job, keeping your head low, head down, and spoke when you're spoken to kind of situation. Especially in a place like Gorman, that's pretty fancy, pretty hoity-toity. I would expect that this particular individual was used to just being, staying in his zone, staying in his lane, and staying in his place. I would also wager to guess that he's used to kind of, being looked down upon. He even said that there's certain things that he's not allowed to talk to or discouraged from talking about with the clients. And Cassian was really, I mean, just treated him like a normal human being, and was very open to him, and wasn't putting on any pretense. And I know Cassian was playing a character. He could have played it very hoity-toity. He could have played it very arrogant and posh or whatever, but he didn't do that. Instead, he decided to work to make that connection with the bellman, and as a result, because Cassian is so good at what he does, that was again the most human interaction in the entire episode. So, what's the lesson? Right? What's the lesson? The lesson is don't posture. Right? It's not a one-upmanship. It's not a dick measuring contest. Right? It's about human interaction. You likely, for sure, have more to offer than you're being recognized for, and more to offer than you're probably allowing yourself to show, right? As we talked about at the beginning. But just because you are capable or knowledgeable or you have this greatness, it doesn't mean that anybody else is less than, right? It doesn't mean that they don't have anything to offer. So stop measuring and stop trying to be measured. That's what posturing is. Again, this is not a one-upmanship. Even in a corporate setting, if you're vying for, let's say the same position as multiple other people are vying for, I think people, regardless of the competition, still would rather be treated with dignity and respect and with kindness, basically as a human being, right? And actually, in doing so, in treating each other like human beings, you actually get better results. Right? You get better reactions because you get better connections. That one short conversation with the concierge was the most productive 3 minutes in the entire episode of interactions because Cassian treated him with dignity and kindness. So, sure, be confident, but not prideful and arrogant. Be humble, but not meek. And always remember that there is a human being at the other side of that interaction that has a story to tell. But you'll never hear it if you're too busy posturing and not listening. All right. Well, that is our episode. Hopefully that makes sense. My topic on posturing. Again, I've been around that word and that principle for my entire career. I've never really taught it that much. I mean, maybe early on in my career, I definitely was taught it a lot. But my approach is really just have a conversation and be willing to really listen and get to know the individual that you're having an interaction with, right? Really be willing to sit with them and see them for who they are, and at the very least hear where they're coming from and hear their story, right? When you treat people with that level of dignity and kindness, doors really start to open up for you, as opposed to trying to manufacture doors opening up for you, right? Trying to manufacture and create doors and entryways by posturing and positioning yourself as X, Y, and Z, and also by snap judging other people. Like, one of the things also in my career, as an example, I know I should have said this in the body of the episode, but I used to work as a movie theater usher. Right? I used to tear tickets and pop popcorn, sweep floors at the local movie theater, and given that role, given that job, that position, I would wager to say that not a lot of people that came in, not a lot of patrons would necessarily see me as an entrepreneur, or somebody who would eventually become a top leader and a top earner in the network marketing company that he's with, right? So again, it's just an example of the levels of posturing and positioning, and the snap judgments as a result. And I know it's largely unconscious, but the more aware we are that we do this, the better we can get at actually making human connection. Again, that's really, I think, what it's all about. In a world that's sorely missing it and needing it, I think this is a very, very apropos and topic, and a very important topic to share. So hopefully it made sense. And in the context of Andor, I know Cassian did have a motive. Of course, he's a spy, right? He's on a mission, and he's getting information, as much information as he can. But really, again, it's the most productive 3 minutes in the entire episode when it comes to the human interactions and what he's able to get in that 3 minutes, as opposed to like multiple visits with the Gorman rebels, right? And of course all the other interactions. So yeah, really makes a lot of sense in that context, at least to me. Anyways, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Leave a comment in the comment section of the YouTube version, or you can click the link that says send a text on the podcast and send me a message. I'll read it, and we can connect. We could have further discussions. Also, the best place to really connect with me and have discussions is Blue Sky. If you're not on that app, it's a great social network. It's a great app. I absolutely love it, and it's my primary social network. So it's a great place to connect. I love having conversations there. So come find me on Blue Sky. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes of this episode. Anywho, now it's time for the shout out. Yep. This week's shout out goes to Don Childs and Roy Hurley. Don Childs and Roy Hurley, two local guys here in my town. And, I live in a very small town. I don't actually live in town even. I live about 40 minutes outside of town. But overall, we're part of a municipality that's less than 600 people. But I've recently, since the hurricane, have gotten out more and connected with the community, which I moved up here to be a hermit, but it was really nice to just connect with more people post-hurricane especially. And these two individuals in particular have really been encouraging and supportive of my foray back into music. I originally met Don in town. We were just I was out having beers and we connected, and then I met Roy through Don, and both of them are incredible musicians, and both of them play local open mics. So they really, again, they've just encouraged me to come out. They've encouraged me to, and supported me playing, even though I'm so rusty. Okay, so just kind of a little backstory. As a musician, I was in a band, I was in a group, and I was the front man, I was the singer. And given that, I never played by myself, right? I always had the gang. I always had the crew with me. We would jam, and I was, I always had that level of connectedness and support when performing. And so to perform solo, and back myself up, and play guitar and sing at the same time, it's just really, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Not only do I not have those motor skills, and I still need to work on them. But then there's all that self-judgment that you experience when you perform in front of a live audience, good or bad, right? Even if your performance is good, there's still that level of self-judgment. And so, as rusty as I am, these two guys have been so supportive. And they're like, yeah, just keep coming out. They invite me out to these open mics all the time. I just did one this past Sunday, and then I'm doing one on Wednesday night, which will be tonight if you're listening to this on the release on the release day. So yeah, I just wanted to give these guys a shout out. They've really just kept encouraging me to keep at it. They've given me suggestions on gear and pedals and things to practice, and so yeah, I really appreciate them for that, and I just wanted to shine some light on them. So Don and Roy, if you're out there listening, which I know you are, I doubt you are, but even if you are, whether you are or aren't, I really want to say I appreciate the both of you for continuing to support and encourage me on my music journey. So for that reason, this week's shout out goes to you. Okay, one last thing before we go. As usual, I want to ask you, if you're not already following the show, please follow the show. If you like this stuff, if you like the conversations that we have, I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to really grow the show these next 2 years as we build to Star Wars Celebration in 2027. So one of the best way, well, no, not one of the single best way you can help me grow this show is by subscribing, by following if you're not already following. So go ahead and hit that plus sign at the top of whatever app you happen to be listening on, and of course you can subscribe on YouTube. And then beyond that, the next best way you can help us grow the show is by sharing it. Right? If you think of just one person who you think might enjoy and appreciate this content as well, then just smash that share button. It takes 3 to 5 seconds. Copy and paste and send a quick message and share to another Star Wars lover, to another person who, again, you think might appreciate and enjoy this content. I would definitely appreciate you doing that, and it would go a long way to helping us achieve our goal for 2027 celebration. Okay, so that's going to do it for real this time. Thank you again for tuning in. Next week, we're going to talk about Andor Season 2, Episode 6. So that's going to wrap up that particular story arc. So until then, have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you next week with a fresh new one. So until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.